What's going on, guys? Welcome back to NolanTCG, and we are back here today for another deck profile, and this time, it's for Floowandereeze. So this is the deck I'm likely going to be playing the most this upcoming format. I really enjoy the overall playstyle of Floowandereeze, and just overall, the art, everything it really does is just fun. I like to get really monkey and be like, normal summon, normal summon, normal summon, normal summon. But we don't use floodgates, because floodgates are for helmet decks. And this is not a helmet deck, even though it requires you to normal summon Rabina and then do everything. Overall, though, really enjoying the deck. When you don't see a Rabina, of course it's going to suck if you don't have a way to access it, or your Eaglin doesn't also have follow-up cards. It can be pretty rough, but hey, that's just kind of what happens with the bulk of the decks I play, isn't it? It's almost like not seeing a Dragon Maid normal summon is still going to haunt me. But yeah, let's get into the profile for this one. But as always, before we get started, we're going to completely stuff that up, but hit that subscribe button if you are new here, because we are always happy to have new people on the channel. And let's get on into the deck profile. Before we do get started on this one, though, it is brought to you, of course, by yourplaymat.com, who got us our beautiful NolanTCG extra deck sleeves. These are available on yourplaymat.com, as well as you can get custom sleeves and custom playmats, so whatever you need for the current format. There is an affiliate link in the description down below that does get you a little bit of a discount on your order. Also, enter the code NOLAN10YP for 10% off your order. Also kicks back a little bit to the channel, so everything will be very much appreciated. If you're shopping there, you're getting custom sleeves, custom playmats down. Make sure to enter our code at checkout. But let's get on into this deck profile. Okay, so starting us off, of course, we open up with our 3 copies of the mandatory Floowandereeze and Rabina. Our card is the best card in your deck, hands down. Maybe Map might have something to say about it, but essentially, when you're resolving your Rabinas, you're having a good time. So far, everything that I've played with the deck, the only time I felt like the deck was bad was the only time I didn't have access to a Rabina. And that's naturally how this deck is going to work. If it's nice and cool and mellow, you can definitely hear the rain hitting my the roof outside my window. So, apologize if that's showing up too much, but hopefully it's a little bit relaxing and chill. As we move on, though, we do go into the next one. So this is the one that's going to be searching our level 7 or higher. That's Floowandereeze and Eaglin. Overall, the 2 cards that make the entire deck go round are one searches the other. Other searches your tribute summons, and your tribute summons then beat your opponent. Then after that, we are just playing one of for the other ones. So we're playing 1 Took and 1 Stree. I've messed around with 2 Took, 1 Stree, 2 Stree, 1 Took. Overall, though, I've just decided to settle onto the 8 ratio to be able to fill as many other kind of flex cards in the deck as possible. Try and add some like random layers of consistency to the deck wherever I can. And overall, just trying to make the deck as best and as powerful as possible. Then we go into our tribute summons after that. So, of course, we are just playing 1 copy of M-Pen. I said, of course, like it was going to be super obvious. But yeah, 1 copy of M-Pen. You only really needed to resolve it once to get the spell and trap card that you need. Then establishes that kind of like floodgate that your opponent has to out. When they do out it, though, you can banish it off with a Stree and then add it back with a Toucan. Hopefully, you've already established your full rotation. And then you can just get it back that way. Then we go into Riser. So I am playing 2 Riser in my list. Reason why I'm playing the 2 Riser is because you want to be able to loop it if you get into like an extended grind game. There are times when you can Riser multiple times in the same turn. If your opponent allows that to happen, they have not played around anything, at which point they are having a really bad time. But yeah, so we're going 1 Riser, 2 Riser to make sure that we can use 1 Riser and 2 Riser and loop them around. Then after that, we are still playing the 1 copy of Apex Avian. This is the 40th card, and I considered strongly cutting it. In the end, though, I decided to keep it in the main deck simply because there were too many times where my opponents couldn't out an M-Pen, and then I felt as though I still needed, like, you can't, of course, make a Riser, because typically if they haven't outed the M-Pen, you have full control of the board at that point. You don't need to Riser on your turn. Instead, you want to Apex Avian. That will just shut them off on the next turn. They're going to have a really bad time, because now all of a sudden, they're still staring at the M-Pen, they now have an Apex Avian out, and there is the threat of the Riser once they normal summon. So keeping the Apex Avian in just felt as though it was a good choice for the deck. Then after that, we do have our level 4 Floodgate. That is our Barrier Statue of the Stormwinds. Just something that can hopefully skip your opponent's main phase 1 as they need to go to battle phase to out it. And then hopefully at that point, that doesn't mean they've outed your M-Pen, and then your M-Pen's still staring at them as a Floodgate that they just are going to have a tough time outing. Then lastly, last of the kind of normal summons, I guess, it is 1 copy of Dogmatica Ecclesia the Virtuous. I have decided to expand out and play the Dogmatica package in my list. Originally I wasn't, but I felt as though it would add a layer of consistency that I was missing in the deck. I haven't, in that case, played Book of Moon, simply because I had to choose between one or the other, and I opted to go for the Dogmatica package. Then we get into our hand traps, wonky ratios, because we are playing, of course, the Crossout Designator. So we have the 2 copies of Ash Blossom and Joyous Springs, followed up with 1 copy of Droll and Lockbird and 1 copy of Effect Veiler. There is the Small World builds, you can consider playing this. One of my friends, Tom, is like testing out with that list, where you need to play Droll and Effect Veiler, because then you can activate Small World and then go through for a Zeus, because you can get Zoodiac Cataroost if off your Robina and your Eaglin. So that is something to keep in mind if you do want to play that variant of the build, but this is kind of the hand trap ratio I'm kind of stuck playing at the moment, because we want to be playing that Crossout. Then we get into our spells, of course, the second best card in the deck, 3 copies of Floowandereeze and the Magnificent Map. Not only does it let you essentially search anything in your deck, and also get that bonus normal summon, it also then lets you normal summon your opponent's turn when they normal summon, so 2 effects that are both very, very good. Then, of course, because it's a field spell, 1 copy of Terraforming to search it. Then after that, we only play the 1 copy of Floowandereeze and Unexplored Maps, or Explored Maps, sorry. Essentially, you're just going to be using this to tribute summon your opponent's cards. You do not you send your opponent's cards for your tribute summons. You keep in mind, this does not play around Zombie World. Originally in the OCG, I don't believe it had this is still treated as a tribute summon, so it was playing around that you could. This does not play around Zombie World. However, it plays around Mask of Restrict, so good times, good times. Your opponent sides it, this is your out to Mask of Restrict. It also lets you mulligan, which is always good. Then we go into our draw spells. Do remember that this does conflict with this in the Pot of Prosperity, so if you activate the Prosperity, you can't Unexplored Winds to mulligan. Do remember that. We have, of course, though, the 3 copies of Pot of Prosperity and 3 copies of Pot of Duality. In this build that I've gone with, Prosperity is much better to play over the Extravagance. If you're playing the builds where your extra deck is completely irrelevant, feel free to play Extravagance, but it is, of course, not going to be specifically searching you the Robina. Then, of course, after that, we do move into those Crossout Designators. We have, of course, 3 of those. You've seen the ratios that we're playing earlier in the deck. Do keep in mind you can use the Crossout Designator to chain block your normal summons. If you, say you normal summon one, they don't have a response. Actually, that's a bad example. Say if you want to play around an Ash Blossom, you just have the feeling they have an Ash Blossom, or they've got set back row that you don't think are an impermanence. You can activate the Crossout Designator, banish, say, Toucan, if you're not going to be using Toucan that turn. Normal summon your Robina, your Toucan will still activate, but it will not return to your hand. Thus, it will chain block the Robina. Then we go into the cards after that. It is the rest of our Dogmatica line, of course. That is 3 copies of Nadir Servant. Remember, Nadir plus Crossout Designator can search any card in the deck, which is always good, because again, you just go Crossout Designator, declare Toucan on the activation of your Servant. So you activate Servant, they don't ash you. You chain Crossout Designator, call Toucan. Then when the Nadir Servant resolves, you send a card from the extra deck that we are going to go through later, and then that card will then search anything in your deck, because you then have a banished Wing Beast. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about if you're a Floowandereeze player. And then we have, of course, the last 2 power 1-ofs in the spell lineup, of course. 1 Called by the Grave, 1 Gold Sark. Of course, Gold Sark is your chain block, and Called by the Grave gets around hand traps. Then for our trap line, we are playing 1 copy of the Floowandereeze and Dreaming Town. Of course, you want to be able to normal summon your opponent's turn and guarantee it, and Dreaming Town does that. Then, of course, after that, 1 copy of Dogmatica Punishment. Did have this at 2, but I ultimately cut it to 1. And then lastly, the 1 copy of Infinite Impermanence for your Crossout Designator. Okay, now we go into our extra deck. So, of course, we do have our Zeus package to start. Probably the most staple thing you can play in a Floowandereeze extra deck. That is your Zeus line. That is your 2 copies of Assembled Nightingale, your 2 copies of Downed Magician, and your 2 copies of AA Zeus. Of course, you're just going to be using the rank up. Remember, you can't summon anything from this extra deck the turn you activate any of your Floowandereeze effects. The add back to hand or the summon effects. Either. You cannot use your extra deck. Remember that. Then, of course, we have our Nightmare line, or essentially our access code line. So we've got 1 copy of Phoenix, 1 copy of Unicorn, 1 copy of access code. Typically, if you just have a massive board and you're just going to be like, I'm just going to condense and go for game here, you can just put all of your level 1s into a pile and then make an access code. Of course, you're going to climb through there, of course. That's dumb to just go straight in the access code, of course. I'm sure you knew what I meant. And then we have, next off, our punishment targets. So we do have 1 copy of Ferjit, the Barren Blossom. If you already have your essential, normal summon you're going to be using, you can just mulligan a card out of your hand and hopefully you can see something that's a little bit nice. Then we have 2 copies of Tri-Brigade Shurig, typically using 1 for the Nadir Servant, 1 for the punishment, just so we can ensure the ability to add cards to our hand. Just mainly because, yeah, when Shurig goes to graveyard, it adds Wing Beast if you have Wing Beast in Banish. And because you're going to be putting Wing Beast in your Banish, this is going to resolve. And then lastly, we have 1 copy of the Wind Pegasus at Ignister, and then 2 copies of Elder Entity Intis. Okay, we are going to quickly go through the side deck just because side deck is kind of relevant in this kind of build because you don't have access to certain things that most people will be able to play in the current format, like Token Collector, and you can't play Nibiru and stuff like that just because, again, when you're summoning on your opponent's turn, you can't use cards like that. So you do have to kind of get a little bit creative. This is a card that used to be in my main deck, and it has now shifted back to my side deck, just because it kind of burned me too many times. Yes, it's super powerful when you open it, but when you, like, top deck it, when you're in, like, a grindy game, it kind of really sucks. You can manipulate your grave, but it does require you to have a very good hand, and drawing the shifter on the follow-up is just not something I want to be doing all the time, especially going, like, in game 1, if I'm, like, gone first, gotten hand-trapped, my opponent set up a board, I then don't want to top deck a shifter or not be able to use it, so hence the shifter is in the side deck. Games 2 and 3, I'm more than happy to have it in, but game 1, wasn't really feeling it. Then we have the Dark Ruler no more. I just want to turn off our opponent's entire board, and then we can just start picking it apart as we go. Say they're playing a Link deck, you just Dark Ruler them, start summoning, get your imp on board, then they're still Dark Rulered next turn. And then we have, after that, back row removal, pretty standard, 3 Cosmic and a Harpy's Feather Duster. Next off is the cute card that I'm going to be testing out for a little while here, just around stuff like Sword Soul. Sword Soul, I also have issues that can come up at locals in relations to stuff like the Warrior deck. Let's just say Warrior deck. It's Aurora on Turbo. And that is 3 copies of Soundproofed. Soundproof reads, you can activate this card at the start of your main phase 1, and only if you control no face-up Synchro monsters. Neither player can special summon Synchro monsters into your opponent's next end phase. Essentially is just going to be a turn skip for Sword Soul and for, that Aurodon Turbo decks. You just skip their turn. So, good card to have in the side deck. Excited in going first, slap it down, set up your board. Their turn is effectively skipped. If they choose to normal summon, you go plus, and then, hey, hopefully you've won the game from there on turn 3. And then lastly, the other 2 cards in the side deck are just 2 infinite impermanents to round out your 3 ofs. But that does wrap us up here for the deck profile for this one. So as always, if you do have any recommendations or things you would change, do make sure to comment them down below. Given that I'm playing this deck extended going forward, I would very much like to see some recommendations of what the people are doing with their lists. Overall, I really want to find a way to fit Book of Moon in here as well, but I don't want to go above 40 because I want to be able to keep it as consistent as possible, because that is, again, the issue. But as always, I am Ben from NolanTCG, and have a good afternoon, everybody.